What changed your mind?
Well, I think that obviously, clearly, what was being contemplated was totally unacceptable to the general public, obviously, and the media. And I think that when we took a step back and had a chance to talk to the league and some of our partners and some of our fans, what we thought was an opportunity to give somebody a second chance was clearly not acceptable in relation to what had previously happened and what he had been involved with. So I think at the end of the day, when the public is that clear about their opposition to something, and I think you acknowledge that you've misread a situation, you've got to clarify that, you've got to admit the mistake, and you've got to be public about that with the fans and your supporters and the media, and then you got to move forward.
Would you have changed your mind without the league intervention?
You know what? I think the answer is yes, just because of what we saw in terms of the public, for good reasons, reaction to it, and they just feel very strongly, obviously, that this is unacceptable. That there may be a time and a place for Coach Briles to coach, but it's not now.
You're saying the public would feel it's unacceptable. Do you?
Yeah, I think in retrospect, I think that clearly the timing was inappropriate. I think that it was a poor decision that in retrospect we shouldn't have made. And I think that everything we do here demonstrates great community will. Everything we do in the community, we're very, very sincere about it. And I think clearly we missed the mark in terms of the message we were sending.
Who's ultimately responsible for that decision, Scott? Is it June's decision? Is it yours? Is it Bob's?
Oh, I don't think there's any question. Ultimately, I'm responsible because any discussion or situation like this ultimately has to be brought to me. So obviously, I'm responsible for the bad decision. We should have stopped the decision. I think we got wrapped up a little bit too much in the inner sanctum of football discussions and forgot about very important things, about things like our standing in the community and how this reflects upon the franchise.
On the fan a few minutes ago, you said there was no moral high ground in this. What do you mean by that?
Well, I think what I was referencing was, we had thought this was an opportunity for a second chance, and I think clearly that's not good enough. When you have an issue this serious, regardless of the circumstances, you can't take a moral high ground around a second chance. It's clearly not the time and the place for a second chance, and I think that's what I was referencing.
What can you say to all the women's groups or women's abuse groups that you've upset with this original decision?
Well, I think they have a reason to be upset and concerned. I think again, the circumstances of what happened down there are horrific. I think it'll play itself out as to what responsibility specifically Art Briles had, but that'll play itself out in the legal courts. But we've done everything to support women. We've done everything to support the league's programs. I think you'll obviously see us do more and more of that. But clearly, the last thing we want to send is a message that we don't support women and families. And I think everybody who's been around this organization understands we do a tremendous amount for women and families. Everything we do is actually about, from a community standpoint, is about children and children's health and welfare. And obviously, mothers and women are an integral part of that. And there's absolutely no place for us sending a message that anything related to domestic violence towards women is in any way, shape, or form acceptable.
Can you walk us through the original decision and why you thought it was a good idea in the first place?
Well, I think a good idea is all relative. I think, was it acceptable or not? And I think sometimes what happens is you get too involved in making a decision without reflecting on the bigger picture of the organization. There's a lot of people, for good reason, that support Art Briles personally, and we heard from dozens of those people who spoke to Coach Briles' ethics and standards and personality, and I think at the end of the day, we probably got caught being too myopic in the coaching world and not thinking about the franchise and the message we were sending to the public.
And as part of those discussions, did you speak to women's groups or victims of sexual
Absolutely.
violence about what their reaction would be and whether or not this was a good decision?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the overriding message is there's always opportunity to tell a positive message. And I think what you've seen from the CFL and the teams programs is that, and when I'm talking about players who've been involved in domestic violence, there's a very good policy in place that we adhere to. And I think on many occasions they talk about the worst thing you can do is shun and isolate somebody if they're contrite and if they really want and to admit their mistakes and want to improve the situation. But it's a fine line between that and somebody who's predisposed to domestic violence.
When you talked to Drew yesterday, you said the league was aware of what was going on in your attempts to sign him. When did the league reach out yesterday and say, all right, maybe we misread the situation?
Well, pretty quickly. Yeah, pretty quickly. And I think in fairness, I think the league was aware of it, but we could have done a better job of articulating, specifically when and where we were going to hire Coach Briles. So, I would just say this. I think Randy Ambrosi demonstrated phenomenal attributes as a CEO of the CFL. He's an excellent commissioner. He showed great leadership yesterday, and he really he brought a lot of important issues to the table to us yesterday that were far more important than some of the issues that we had focused on.
Why did it take that conversation for you to change your mind?
It was a combination of things, for sure. I think again we saw that our stance on this being a second chance for somebody was certainly not acceptable versus the impact that everything that happened at Baylor had. So I think it was a combination of conversations, talking to people, and understanding that at the end of the day, our franchise is about our fans and our partners and our community, and this was unacceptable to them.
Bob Young said in his statement that they would have to review now the hiring policy and how you guys go about doing that. What did he mean by that?
Oh, I think when you make a mistake like this, that's absolutely necessary. I think we're going to have to look at everything we do, how we hire people both on the football and the business side, whether that starts with executives on down to players. So I think that's a very necessary thing. I mean, listen, when you make a mistake like this and you have a serious situation to deal with, there's lessons to be learned. And I can tell you we've learned a great amount in the last 24 hours, and I think a thorough a review of our hiring practices and how we make decisions is very important.
Did Art
We'll
make
take
it to
one or two
Hamilton?
more.
Did Art make it to Hamilton, and how did he take the news of the dismissal?
He did, and he was extremely emotional. I think that Art's going to spend the next 3 or 4 months working on the facts of the story. It's a very complicated legal issue, and I think he's going to be working very hard to bring the facts to light over the next few months. But he was extremely emotional about it, very much so.
Do you feel he's innocent?
You know what? It's not. I think it's an ongoing legal proceeding. I think you'd have to be clear about what you're asking me. Was he innocent or guilty of? Ultimately, when you're in charge of an organization, just like I am, you're responsible for what happens. And just like I said, I'm responsible for what happened yesterday.
So,
last question.
Would you hire him
John, speak
again?
the news.
What's that?
Would you hire him again down the road?
No, but I think that we'll see what happens for Art. It's not a right fit for us, and this, as I said, for our fans and our supporters and our partners, this is an acceptable situation for him. I suspect Art Briles will coach football again, but it won't be here.
Thanks, Scott. Thank you.
For sure.